Good evening. In less than a week, one of the biggest criminal trials our region has seen will begin. Nichole Rice will stand trial for murder in the 2007 killing of her then roommate, Anita Knutson. Over the next few days, we'll take a look at the investigation into Knutson's death and how we got here. We start off with a look back at the events surrounding Anita's death. The early June 2007 day began like any other in Minot and for those working in the KMOT newsroom, including former news director Nick Dreyer, who was assigning out stories to reporters. But the day quickly took a turn.
We got a report, I don't even remember how, about a situation that the police were surrounding an apartment or at an apartment by the MSU campus.
He assigned the story to former KMOT reporter Kristen Bean.
And she went out there and found out it was there was someone that was murdered.
According to the Associated Press, Knutson's father had come back to check on his daughter yesterday. They say the father and the landlord entered Anita's apartment and found her dead.
Police would later hold a press conference confirming the death of Anita Knutson, an 18-year-old student at Minot State. Investigators confirming her death was being treated as a homicide, but many questions remained, including how Knutson was killed and how the perpetrator entered the apartment.
Do you know how the intruder got in?
It's still an open investigation. We're not going to answer that question at this time.
Dreyer noted the unusual nature of the crime.
She had lots of friends. She was well liked, and it was just a very odd murder for a community like this.
Those sentiments echoed by the people of Anita's hometown of Butte in 2007, who gathered to honor her.
When the news of Anita's murder made its way through the close-knit community, everyone felt the loss.
Anita was the most, when my grandchildren started on the bus, they were scared and she was there to help them, and they just adore her.
She was the prettiest flower in a field of flowers. She was the nicest person I knew.
But over time, the case would go cold, leaving a family and a community searching for answers. As time went on after Anita's death, those who cared about her the most were left with few answers. I took a look back on how Anita's family and friends worked to keep the case fresh in the minds of the public. After Anita Knutson's death in 2007, months and years would go by with lingering questions of who would do this to a bright young college student who seemed to be loved by all she knew. Little was known other than Anita had been found fatally stabbed in her apartment. But that didn't stop those close to Anita in doing what they could to continue to push for answers.
I have pictures of Anita that I took for her graduation.
I spoke with some of Anita's family and friends in 2017, 10 years after her death, who pleaded for anyone with information to come forward.
It's kind of frustrating that there's just this coward out there that just won't come forward and tell us that one piece of information we need to solve this.
I really feel somebody knows who did this.
10 years is a long time. You know, we don't want it to be another 10 years before we find out anything new.
Another way Anita's circle has worked to keep her memory alive is through this billboard south of Minot on Highway 83. You may have seen if you're heading into town. Minot police partnered with the community to put it up, asking the public for tips on the case. Anita's family and friends have maintained it over the years and through the seasons. The sign even blew down once a few years ago and was put back up. In our 2017 interview, Anita's sister Anna remembering her fondly.
I was in college going through just college life stuff. I wish I could have called her, talked to her about just the problems I was having.
While Anita's family and friends did what they could, Minot police investigators continued to work the case, one which the public wouldn't see any new developments. That is, until early 2022. Those who loved Anita Knutson had waited almost 15 years for answers to her 2007 death. Then, a shocking revelation as police announce a break in the case. In our continued look at the Anita Knutson cold case, we go back to March 16th, 2022. A seemingly normal day for our newsroom quickly turned into one of the biggest breaking stories in recent memory.
A short time ago, Minot police announced they've made an arrest in the 2007 murder of 18-year-old college student Anita Knutson. She was found murdered in her off-campus apartment in June of 2007.
Minot's Public Information Office notifying us of an impromptu press conference earlier that afternoon at City Hall. That's where former police chief John Klug broke the news.
At about 3:25 p.m., 34-year-old Nichole Rice was arrested for murder and taken to Ward County Jail.
Nichole Rice, Anita's roommate at the time of her killing, now charged in her death. Rice arrested at her civilian job on Minot Air Force Base. Klug sounding adamant they had their suspect.
I wish we could have solved this sooner, but at the same time, I'm glad to say that we have the person responsible for the murder of Anita Knutson in custody.
Rice made her initial court appearance the next day from the Ward County Jail over video, eventually bonding out. The arrest raised an immediate question. Why did police arrest Rice now, almost 15 years later? What changed?
Finally, with the help of cold justice, we were able to move forward and regain focus. Due to the resources, logistics, planning, and experts they were able to provide, we were able to obtain an arrest warrant for Nichole Rice.
Klug revealing the department worked with the investigative team of Cold Justice, a series on the Oxygen True Crime Network.
But start with where she ends up.
The left leg is bent up like this.
The show would go on to air a two-part special that October, laying out their meetings with local police investigators, community members, and Anita's family. But as we would soon find out, this would be far from the end of this case, as over the next 3 years, Rice's defense team would raise questions about the evidence against her and if she would be able to receive a fair trial. 3 years ago, Minot police announced the arrest of Nichole Rice for murder in the 2007 killing of Anita Knutson. That case had gone cold for 15 years, but the next 3 years would provide plenty of twists and turns in the courtroom. Here's my report on how we got from March of 2022 to today. Nichole Rice made her initial court appearance on the murder charge in March of 2022. After that, in North Dakota, suspects typically appear for what's known as a preliminary hearing before they're arraigned. At this hearing, the state has to prove there's enough evidence to move forward with the case. Rice's hearing wouldn't take place until almost 6 months later, in September of 2022. Judge Richard Hager ultimately ruled there was enough evidence to move forward, and Rice pleaded not guilty. In the months after, the defense would call into question testimony at the preliminary hearing from a Minot police detective regarding DNA samples taken from the murder weapon and whether Rice's DNA could be excluded. The defense calling for the charge to be dismissed, citing a lack of probable cause, but Judge Hager declined. State prosecutors would later request a gag order on the defense after reports of a survey circulating on social media asking people questions regarding their knowledge of the case. The defense admitting to using that survey to see whether Rice could get a fair trial in Ward County. Judge Hager ordering the survey be taken down. Ultimately, though, the state and defense agreed the case had to be moved out of Ward County following the results of a standard questionnaire, and the trial was moved to Grand Forks in January of 2025. In late 2024, it was revealed Philip Becker, the lead attorney for the defense, was leaving Sand Law Firm, prompting the defense to ask for more time to coordinate with new attorneys. The judge agreed to push the trial back 2 more months, getting to where we are in March of 2025. Now, the state could call 24 witnesses, and the defense will have witnesses of its own, including a former FBI agent who runs a private investigative firm as an expert. Now, Rice is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Jury selection is set to begin Monday in Grand Forks, and we'll be bringing you coverage and live updates. The state and defense questioned 2 separate juror pools of roughly 50 potential jurors each on a myriad of questions as to whether they would be able to fairly and impartially judge the case of State versus Nichole Rice. The parties asking a series of questions, including whether they knew the list of witnesses or any of the attorneys, as well as questions about their knowledge of the case, media coverage, and their thoughts on cold cases similar to Anita Knutson's. It was that inability of the courts to be able to get a fair and impartial jury in Ward County that prompted them to move the case here to Grand Forks County. I spoke with a court administrator here in Grand Forks on how they worked with the clerk of court's office in Minot to make sure that the trial ran smoothly here.
Clerk's offices have been in constant communication about how many jurors need to be brought in, how they're going to facilitate that, what kind of space they're going to need in the courthouse, and things of that nature.
She noted that aside from the 2021 trial for Solomon Pendleton, who was convicted in the killing of Officer Cody Hulte, this was likely one of the biggest cases this courthouse has ever seen. Now, opening arguments could be as early as Tuesday afternoon. At the Grand Forks County Courthouse, I'm Joe Skurzewski reporting for your news leader. Testimony began Tuesday in the case of State versus Nichole Rice, but before we could hear testimony, the courts had to settle an issue with regards to the defense filing a motion to throw out the case entirely.
This is an absolute abortion of justice, Your Honor.
Nichole Rice's defense attorney, Rick Sand, didn't hold back in his argument for dismissal, citing the bombshell investigative report into a former Minot police officer and its mention of the state's case agent, Carmen Asham.
That blows up the credibility of their case agent and lead investigator. There is so much work and so much investigation this creates on our behalf that I believe this rises to the level of dismissal.
Prosecutor Tiffany Sorgan noting Asham was not the focus of the report.
Please note, this is a report regarding Lieutenant McLeod. Sergeant Asham is mentioned in it tangentially.
Judge Richard Hager refusing to toss out the case, but ordering that Asham be made available for a possible deposition by the defense.
Again, I don't believe that it is directly causal to this particular case, and I didn't find any connections in the report that would bring it to that level.
As the case moved to trial, the attorneys presented their opening arguments.
State intends to show you evidence that on the early morning hours of June 3rd, 2007, Nichole Thomas Rice stabbed Anita Knutson twice in the chest, killing her.
Siblings, roommates, they fight. There's issues about an unplugged fish tank, about an alarm clock that wouldn't stop going off. The evidence is going to show you people like Nichole don't kill their roommates over that kind of stuff. They don't put knives through their sternums.
First to take the stand, Anita's adoptive parents, Sharon and Gordon Knutson, who testified to the events surrounding Anita's death and the impact it had on their families.
I checked her, put my hand on her leg, and she was cold.
How did Anita's death affect your family?
Really much, a lot. It's like I can't describe how we felt. It was so bad.
Testimony will continue Wednesday afternoon. Rice is presumed innocent until proven guilty. State prosecutors brought in current and former members of law enforcement to testify to the investigation into Anita Knutson's death. Dale Plessis, the current interim chief for Minot Police, along with former Minot Police investigator David Goodman, testifying to why the department took up an offer from the true crime series Cold Justice to help them investigate the case. They cited a lack of resources and staffing in the wake of the 2011 flood, the oil boom, and an overall increase in crime.
We reviewed all that, made a decision that with their logistics, we would be able to move forward with this investigation a lot smoother than on our own.
But at any point in those 14 years, did you yourself have the time to focus on this matter to give it your full attention?
No.
In lengthy testimony, Goodman recalled Rice's reaction to the apartment after Knutson's death, with Rice immediately noticing her iPod was missing.
Was that unusual to you?
I thought it was kind of strange. I thought it was a quick comment that she would make just standing outside her bedroom door, and how she would know an iPod was missing just that quickly.
Goodman saying he was suspicious of Rice from the beginning.
Some of the her information she was giving she was contradicting herself.
On cross, attorney Rick Sand pressed Goodman on the investigation into someone the defense has floated as an alternate suspect, a man named Devin Hall. Sand questioning Goodman on Hall's reaction upon seeing a picture of the murder weapon.
I learned from him that the medallion, I guess, if you will, was missing from the other side. Again, followed up on a later date. Pardon? On the knife that he had. On a knife that he thought he had. Is there a medallion missing from this knife? There is. Where did it come from? Where did this knife come from? That knife, that's a picture of the knife that we located at the scene of the homicide.
Hall has not been charged in this case. The window screen to the apartment, also a focus of testimony. Goodman saying they tried to emulate someone entering through the cut screen.
I learned that after doing that, I didn't feel that it was possible that the person that committed the homicide entered or exited out the window.
Testimony will continue Thursday morning. Another former officer with Minot Police took the stand Thursday for the state in their case against Nichole Rice. Robert Barnard testifying to his role in the early investigation into Knutson's killing. Barnard noting what he observed as an unusual response from Rice upon learning of her roommate's death.
Best of my recollection, my exact words were, "I'm sorry to tell you that your roommate's deceased and she's been killed." I used the word "she's been killed."
How did the defendant react to that?
She didn't. She was flat, just no real reaction at all.
He was not the only one to question Rice's tenor. Donna Bjelland, a former co-worker of Rice's during that time, providing revealing testimony saying she was scared by Rice's behavior.
I remembered her saying that Anita locked the door, so yeah, she would have to, if she wanted to get to Anita, she'd have to go through the screen to get to her if the door was locked.
The defense pushing former Minot Police Detective McKaylee Talbot on why they didn't further pursue leads on Devin Hall, a man who has not been charged in this case, but has been floated by the defense as an alternative suspect throughout the trial.
Making calls, meeting with people.
I started in 2019 with the report.
And then you arrested Nichole in 2022.
Correct.
Without talking to Devin Hall or the FBI.
Correct.
The jury also hearing from a pathologist who conducted the autopsy on Knutson, ruling her death a homicide, and a DNA forensic examiner who confirmed the presence of Knutson's DNA from samples on a knife and part of the window screen. After testimony wrapped for the day, Judge Hagar heard both sides on the matter of whether to force Devin Hall to be transported from a jail on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation in Montana to Grand Forks to testify in person. We heard from Rice for the first time in this trial when Hagar asked her, while momentarily under oath, if she consented to Hall testifying over video.
We'll be testifying by reliable electronic means.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
And you are in agreement?
I'm in agreement.
The state is expected to bring 4 witnesses to the stand Friday. They could rest their case early to mid next week. Some of the most profound testimony that came from this first week of the Nichole Rice murder trial involved law enforcement's conversations with Nichole and her reaction to finding out of the death of her roommate, as well as former acquaintances of Nichole's who claimed that in the past she admitted to the crime. We heard from law enforcement officers who said that they were surprised at Nichole's response to learning that Anita had died.
No real reaction at all.
Meanwhile, 2 former acquaintances of Nichole's, an Army veteran, as well as a party guest who offered to give her a ride home, both testifying that they heard her admit to the crime.
From Nichole Rice, it was that she did it, that she had killed Anita.
That she had done it to her roommate.
A key point for the defense in this first week of the trial has been questioning law enforcement and those involved in the investigation into Anita's death as to why they didn't further pursue leads into a man named Devin Hall. That's somebody that the defense has floated as a possible alternate suspect in this crime, although Hall has never been charged in this case.
You arrested Nichole in 2022.
Correct.
Without talking to Devin Hall or the FBI.
Correct.
So what we know is that testimony is going to resume Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. in that courtroom right behind me, courtroom 303 here in Grand Forks. A lot of unknowns, though, at this point. We don't know how long the testimony for Detective Carmen Asham is going to be. That could be lengthy testimony. We don't know whether the issue that the defense brought up in their motion regarding the outside investigation into a former Minot police officer that Detective Asham was named in, if that's going to come up in her questioning. We also don't know whether Devin Hall is going to testify remotely over video. The court's allowing him to do that. And we also don't know if Nichole Rice herself is going to testify in her defense. That remains to be seen. Monday morning's testimony in the Nichole Rice murder trial saw yet another twist. Members of Rice's own family, her aunt and uncle Brenda and Mark Glynns, testifying for the state. Brenda Glynn's testifying her niece revealed details of the crime scene she would have not been privy to during a road trip from New Mexico back to North Dakota.
Did Nichole ever say anything to you specifically about Anita deserving to die?
Yes,
What'd she say?
she deserved to die.
Glynn saying why she testified despite the case tearing their family apart.
This whole thing has not only destroyed Knutson's, Nichole's life, my entire family, and the community. And this needs justice. It's time for the truth to be told.
Case agent Detective Carmen Asham testified to how investigators said Rice kept changing her story with different facts in interviews with detectives Robert Barnard and David Goodman in the days following Knutson's death, then Special Agent Meixner, and later Asham. She told the jury how, when the team with the TV show Cold Justice got involved, they worked with them to figure out who to re-interview.
We gave them our input. There was a couple of people that we crossed off the list because we didn't think they were relevant. I know there was at least one person they had on the list that we knew to be deceased and we're not going to be able to re-interview.
So you had some input into the re-interviewing, is that correct?
Yes.
Was Cold Justice calling the shots?
No.
In cross, the defense questioning Asham's credibility after she was named in an outside investigative report into the conduct of former Minot police officer Matthew McLeod. Asham was not the focus of that report, and McLeod was never charged. As the state rested, the case turned to the defense, who called private investigator Doug Coons to the stand. Coons, a former FBI agent investigating the case since 2023, and was critical of the state's position that Rice was their suspect.
We went from the house in Velva to the family function, and then, in this first version, we left out the bar. But why is that significant? She still isn't back in Minot where she would have had access to Anita.
Coons also revealing the defense paid him a flat rate of $10,000 for his contributions to the case. His testimony will resume Tuesday morning.
In the early morning hours of June 3rd, 2007, Nichole Rice took this knife and plunged it into the chest of this girl and killed her.
In closing arguments, prosecutor Tiffany Sorgan spending an hour plus walking the jury through their case against Nichole Rice like puzzle pieces, pointing to Rice discussing crime scene evidence she wouldn't have been privy to if she wasn't there.
She told her aunt about the bowl in the bathroom sink and that the killer washed their hands and cleaned up the knife afterward.
Sorgan challenging the notion the TV series Cold Justice influenced testimony from those who claimed Rice confessed the crime to them.
If Christina was trying to comport her information to what was learned through Cold Justice or to the evidence, wouldn't she have said that bathrobe was pink? She told you what she remembered the defendant telling her, that it was white.
Sorgan also pointing to Rice's changing versions of what happened and the time frame around Knutson's death.
It is. From that farm in Velva to Minot, to the apartment. It's about 40 minutes. She had a window of opportunity of 9.5 hours.
In closing for the defense, attorney Rick Sand offering a blistering critique of law enforcement and the prosecution, questioning their investigation and calling the case a, quote, media circus.
Their own lead investigator, Detective Asham, told you guys she didn't review the whole file. That's not bad police work. That's insane to bring charges when you haven't reviewed a file. They're trying to say this is a puzzle with many pieces. No, it's a murder case. And everybody in here deserves justice. Anita and Nichole, and this isn't how you get it.
Sand challenging the claims over the window of time Rice had to commit the crime and the believability she could do it.
They're trying to use conjecture and hearsay to convince you guys that Nichole got out of bed in the middle of the night, drove to Minot, killed her roommate, scrubbed the scene of DNA. She's this mastermind mob hit killer. Goes back home, has the intestinal fortitude to just go on with life like it never happened. We're talking about a daughter, a sister, a wife, and a mother. This doesn't happen. This is a load of crap.
The jury deliberating for just over 4 hours. Those deliberations will continue Wednesday morning. It took the Grand Forks County jury of 9 men and 3 women just over 6 hours to return a not guilty verdict against Nichole Rice in the 2007 death of her roommate Anita Knutson in Minot.
Nichole Rice not guilty of
The defense crying out in jubilation as the clerk of court read not guilty, with Rice collapsing in her chair, overwhelmed by emotion. It's the conclusion of a 3-year-long case against Rice that took several twists and turns. At trial, the prosecution saying Rice had means, motive, and opportunity, pointing to her alleged confessions to 2 people and inconsistent statements to law enforcement.
And he told you during his testimony that he caught the defendant in a lie during that interview about where she was at or around the time of the murder.
But in the end, the jury sided with Rick Sand and his defense team, who characterized the case against his client as a media circus due to the national attention it received.
It's a media circus because they can put her in that chair, and these people helped them do it. And it's garbage. And they should be ashamed of themselves, all 3 of them.
Family and friends of Knutson's reacting to the verdict. Anita's sister, Anna, speaking on her own behalf, was critical of the defense team's celebration of the verdict, adding, "I spent the last week reliving some of the hardest parts of the last 18 years of my life. And in those 18 years, one thing I've learned is that a not guilty verdict does not mean innocence. I cannot say the same for many of the people in that room, but my conscience is clear." Anita's childhood friend, Tyler Schmaltz, an outspoken advocate for her case over the years, saying in part, "God truly knows what happened that night, and we all will have to stand before him one day and be judged, and I am happy knowing when that day comes, I get to meet Anita again." Nichole Rice walked out of the courthouse Wednesday, now a free citizen, and took part in a brief prayer circle with her family and her law team before going her way. As for the Knutson family, they're still left searching for answers as to the loss of their loved one, Anita. Anita Knutson, by the way, would have turned 37 years old this September. At the Grand Forks County Courthouse, I'm Joe Skurzewski reporting for your news leader. This past week's murder trial in Grand Forks captured the attention of people all across the country. It was also a learning opportunity for some up-and-coming criminal justice students. I spoke with a student and instructor at the University of North Dakota on how they're incorporating the trial into their lessons. For some inside courtroom 303 in Grand Forks the past couple of weeks, the trial of State versus Nichole Rice was life-altering. For some in the gallery, it's been a first-hand experience learning about the justice system. That includes Lauren Lilquist, a sophomore at UND studying criminal justice.
I hope to learn more of what goes on in the courtroom because then you get a more first-hand experience rather than watching over like a Zoom or like a YouTube video.
Lilquist and her classmates rotated, sitting in on the proceedings, taking notes and sharing them with each other. A few of the students were even present during the emotional reading of the verdict on Wednesday.
Rice not guilty.
Their instructor, Megan Mitchell, says they've discussed how they would handle the case if they were jurors.
And how some people may say, you know, you guys, I maybe wouldn't have remembered that exactly either, right? That there is variation in how people are able to recall things.
Mitchell says not all of her students want to be lawyers. Some are pursuing careers in law enforcement.
Being able to see police officers on the stand and talking about how they collected evidence and different types of procedures that were necessary.
Lilquist says the nature of this case stood out.
The fact it's been a cold case for quite a while, I find that more intriguing.
Mitchell says it's a case her students can relate to.
For college-age students in particular, this case strikes a different chord with them because they are living this right now. They are in the exact time that Anita was, in college, going to school.
Mitchell says she may use elements of this trial in future class offerings.